Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Inspiring Educators. Just like every time, in fact, better than every time, better than most times, I have a really inspirational educator with me. Before I start the recording, I have a background chat, and the kind of achievements today's guest has, they're outstanding, mind-blowing. And when you understand that all those achievements didn't just come automatically, in fact, the starting point was not easy. There's a lot of work that had to be done. And then not just giving up against adversities, but achieving more and more. I was listening to that story and I was just getting inspired. And I think you all will be super inspired by our guest at Inspiring Educators today. Let me quickly take a moment, introduce the person, and then, I'll pass on the introduction mic to them. So today we have Dr. Usha Reddy. She has done outstanding work. She's been the CEO of schools. She's been founding principal. She's adopted government schools. She has done a lot of social initiatives. And currently she is an advisor to GVK Group, where she's working on setting up schools, working on other educational initiatives of the group. You must have heard about Meridian Schools if you know about Hyderabad. She's like CEO, principal, and she was the one person who actually set it up as the first inclusive school and built an outstanding SEN department there. And I can go on, by the way, a long list of national awards, meeting the presidents, prime ministers, governors. I can keep on and I can keep going on and on, but I'll stop myself and I'll welcome Dr. Usha Reddy. And I'll request her to introduce herself before we start discussing about her life story. Dr. Reddy, over
Namaste.
to you.
Yeah, namaste and good afternoon to you, Rishabh, and to anybody else who's listening to us this afternoon. It's my pleasure to be part of this program. And as educators, it's always exciting to share our stories and learn from those of others. And if we can inspire somebody as a leader, I think we've done our job. So I think I began very small. I've been one of those fortunate people, who actually don't. And, it was by chance that a friend of mine who owned a school in Nellore had actually requested me to become the principal because she was going abroad on some work. My daughter was studying there. And day one, I sat in the principal's chair. Sometimes I feel it's not your qualifications, but it's the common sense that leads you on to what you ought to do. So I think I got into the classes, saw what was happening, realized that a lot more can be done. I come from a school called Rishi Valley, which is still ranked as the best residential school in the country. And, I could only think of my teachers, the way they taught me and what was happening in the classes decades after I got out of school. So I began training the teachers into what I thought was the right way to actually get children interested into why they're learning something and how they should learn something and make it enjoyable and pleasurable and not enforced onto them, if you understand what I mean. It's
Absolutely.
not important to cover the textbook cover to cover. For me, it is helping children discover what is there within the pages. And along with that, if you can infuse what's happening in the world around them, then I think we're equipping them for life. So I think it is with these simple thoughts that I became an educator, and there was no stopping me thereafter.
You put it so...
I think it was a pleasure being with Meridian Schools for 24 years. First as a principal, then, I set up 4 branches for them. One is a franchise branch as well. And I also was the CEO of the group. And, thereafter, after I quit, ISKCON contacted me. So I'm also their advisor for Basilwoods School. And we've set up that school as well. And with this organization, the current organization, we are based out of the EMRI Green Health Services campus of the GVK Group. And we are into the process of setting up schools as well to deliver quality academics. And we also look into what is happening here. That EMRI services, they run ambulance services in about, 16 states and 2 union territories. It's a vast organization, and I commend the chairman of the group, Dr. GVK Reddy, for this initiative to save lives. And the impact is, immeasurable, of what we're contributing to the society. So I feel my little work here is yet to begin. but I know it can be an impactful one with the NEP in place. I'm trying to figure out, ways in which we can engage a lot of school children into programs.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. And guys, anybody who has to understand it better, pause, rewind, listen to it again and again, and keep getting inspired while we move ahead. So, you shared it so smoothly, so flawlessly that it just came to you and you became a principal. But I really want to know what happened behind the scenes there. Day one, you start, and I'm sure you would have faced
I think
number of challenges there. What were the challenges that you were facing?
Pardon?
Sorry, I think the voice broke a bit. Let me rephrase that. So I know it's easy to say that I started as a principal, but I know you must have faced a lot of challenges day one. So we would love to know what was happening behind the scenes when you started as a principal. What were those challenges that you were facing day in, day out? In the first 4 weeks, what was it like, and what was your biggest learning from that?
Well, I think, I had an open mind, and I think that's what a learner requires. Never looked at myself as head of organization, but I am a keen observer, so I got into the classes silently. I saw that, it was an enforced, very teacher-driven kind of a atmosphere, where they had, the hard words that they used to call it those days, not even new words of the lesson. So you're already preconditioning the child's mind that it's hard, right? And then after that, you get ahead with whatever's in the textbook, sometimes with the textbook in hand. And then, they would actually get them to answer all the questions and whatever other exercises. And it was a done day. And I said, my God, I really don't know if this is education. It's very hard because in towns, this is how it happens. And I had the privilege of having got educated in one of the premium institutes, like I mentioned. So I went back to the teachers and I began silently behind the doors after a couple of weeks, just talking to them about what quality education is about, and how different it can be, the same lesson. So I actually took sample sessions for them in the staff meetings and asked them how they felt, and then they realized that, the way that you can teach is a myriad ways, and you can definitely make it more effective, creative, and innovative. And also, when there's a two-way interaction instead of having a silent class, I feel there'll be a lot more learning. So I said, I'm okay with the noise. I'm okay with the bubbliness of the children. I love the laughter of kids in the corridor when I'm walking by. I know then learning is happening. So from that very typical stereotyped, silent school, where only the teacher's voices and perhaps the banging of dusters was heard, I think there was a transformation into what it ought to be. I think it's a small beginning. And I think for any leader, for that matter, every day is a challenge. So all we need to do is just put yourselves in the seats of the others there and see what best you would have done in that scenario. And I think act accordingly and go slow. Because, if you rush into too much of change, there's always a lot of resistance. So you have to take people into your fold, make them a part of your team. And then, collectively as a goal, always tell them that the win is theirs, not yours. You're just behind them to back them. And, where the accolades come for them and the parents come and appreciate, that, things are going great. I think all credit should be to the teacher in the classroom and not to the leader of the school.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I loved how you put it, right? That you have to lead by example. You can't just go and say, do this. You actually have to show it to them how to do it and then continuously train them and guide them. And, one question that popped up into my mind right when you were sharing that was, you had that background where you had experienced outstanding teaching. So you knew what it looked like. And for you, it would have been easier. And I'm not saying easy, I'm saying easier, which means easier than others. But it would have been a bit easier to conceptualize that in your mind. But then sharing it with your peers or maybe the teachers of the school and making them realize what it means and facing that resistance, that is a whole new world. So what were those first few challenges that you think you faced and you think many people would face who would like to bring out that change in their schools? And what can they do to work around that resistance to change that is coming?
Yeah, I think, people do resist change, and we all know there's nothing more permanent than change, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think you have to accept that there would be that small minority of people who will resist no matter what. It's important to, try your best. And when you feel that there's too much resistance, get them one-on-one and then start sharing with them why we're trying to change things and why they ought to do. I think the best beginning is to start acting upon, what needs to be done. And that's exactly what I did. I took a sample session. So, instead of just hitting it out by writing the title on the board, you start asking questions. You check the prior knowledge of, the teachers who were my students at that point in time, and then you take it from there. So, these methods, get all the random thoughts on the board, and then you start diving into the topic slowly, and then you erase all the things that are not part of what you actually want. So when you do that on the board, I think it's one of those activities that actually gets the thinking of everybody straight. And, it's a place where there's no judgment. Every answer, that the kids give or the teachers gave in this respect should be valued and put down. But again, when you start answering the prime question or the essential question of your teaching, then they themselves will say, yeah, I think this doesn't work. This is what ought to be there. And then, you let them do it without taking the duster and just wiping off whatever was not necessary for you. So it's a participatory method, I think that keeps the learners engaged. And, you formulate this knowledge together. It's easy to just give a mind map and say, okay, this is the lesson about. You can get somebody, an adult, learn any lesson in 10 minutes flat. And that's my belief. But that's not what we're aiming at. Together, we're constructing knowledge, isn't it? And that in the process actually enhances your memory too. So that's the beauty of engaging the learners and ensuring that this learning is enjoyable, pleasurable, and it also lasts because they take ownership of it. It's not somebody just giving it to them, but we're creating this knowledge. So I think the power of ownership, is something that I've always valued. It was always a great tool for me. And that's why we were able to build great teams, no matter in which organization I went to thereafter. I think taking the team along is the core to the success of any organization. There were other things, Rishabh, let me put it this way. One is with the teachers. One is with, in towns, the language, you are able to very effectively communicate in English, whereas they have those barriers. But one thing is they look up to you in awe because they too want to speak like you. So, I used to have communication classes for them. And in fact, before a PTM, the do's and don'ts and how you greet a parent, what you say, what you don't say, how you say it, always begin with the positives. Otherwise I had watched, the first thing is, now you come, your son was like this, he didn't do well, and he's always like this, he's played. You don't start off, with all the negatives. No parent wants to listen to that.
Absolutely
no teacher would want to listen to the negatives, neither you or I, for that matter. So always I tell them that, the communication and the manner in which you communicate should be effective. And for that, if you start with the negative, the other person has already closed their minds to you. They hurt, the emotions are at play. So this is what I call as effective communication with parents. That's integral. And I think I had a lot of work to do there. And, ultimately make a transition. When it came to habits, when you have, officers' children with you in small towns, they are the big ones who think that, it's okay. So when you have their children, they can walk in at 10:30. And, they come with gunmen, they come with everybody, and they think it's absolutely okay. For me, every kid in uniform is same. So once, twice, thrice, I made the teacher tell them, I made the office inform them that these are the school timings. And next, what I did is I said, shut the gates. So, and finally somebody said, oh, ma'am, it's the SP's son and you ought not to be doing this. I said, I'm doing what is right for the child. And after some time, the office got a call saying that he's coming with a couple of other things. And so they told me, SP is arriving, and there were a lot of men who jumped off those jeeps and everybody was on campus. And they said, ma'am, should we stop him? Should we say you're not there? I said, no, please send him to my office. And I was awestruck by this gentleman. Till date, I can tell you. He walked into my office and he said, I want to meet the principal. I said, you are in the principal's office. He said, ma'am, I salute you. There was no amount of talking to the child as parents that we were able to discipline him. The teachers were also kind of lenient because of my designation. I want that to be a plus point and not a negative point for my child. So your firmness has silently actually shaken him up, that, I know from tomorrow that he will be there in school on time. And if he doesn't, please continue to do what you're doing. And everybody in the office was stunned. But let me tell you, when you talk of value systems that we want to, get our children to live by, we have to stand by those principles, and they will emulate us. If I'm going to be bowing down because somebody's dad is a so-and-so, getting the right track for that child or for the other children, because they will think ma'am has a special corner for so-and-so because they're so-and-so son. And I wouldn't want that at all, right? I don't think the teachers ought to have done it, or the school. So there are certain things that you do because that's your personality, that's your belief system. And I was fortunate that he, as a parent, not as the SP of the district, actually understood that. And, and I just wish them well. And so there are many such instances that we as leaders, must showcase. So my first 4 months, this was one incident that I had to encounter too.
But and I think I'm just imagining myself, if I was a teacher in that school, I would be so awe-inspired by you that I want to follow this leader, right? And it would have been really motivating for almost everybody at school that, yes, she's the right leader that we want for ourselves. And that's for, let's say, 99% of the people. 99% of the people would have looked at you and said, I want to learn what she's doing. I would want to, emulate. I would want to develop with her, learning from her, learning with her. But there would be this 1% crowd who would say, she's trying new things. She'll not last for long. Those teachers.
You're telling me.
You tried to explain it to us by doing it yourself, but you did it for maths. This will not work in physics. Or you did it for English. This would not work in biology, right? Or this would work in that subject, but not in my subject. How can you do it in music? How can you do it in physical education, right? So there's this 1%. And we all have experienced it. Right. I want to know, how does Dr. Reddy identify, and I'll again use a wordplay here, how does the doctor cure all of those kind of people who need that extra cure there?
So with all humility, Rishabh, I submit that, people who worked with me, we've created 40 leaders, 40 principals now. Okay. Beautiful. And I come from a small organization. So I do believe that, that you set an example. People are watching you all the time, your team members. They want to learn from you. As long as they're learning from something from you positive, they'll always respect you. So today, when I go for, let's say, a conference, it's like an alumni for me, because, the people who worked with me are all over the place, and they come, and usually we're making a lot of noise saying, let's take a pic with ma'am. So I have these huge, group of people coming, and, they're all principals, but we, behave like, old team members and, have a bit of fun. One thing that most of them tell me is, ma'am, when I have a very difficult situation, I close my eyes and I think, what would Usha Reddy ma'am have done? And, I would have seen you handle so-and-so situation calmly in such a manner. And then I put myself in the same shoe, and, fortunately, I found the solution too. So that's, very nice when I listen to it from my team, who are now all principals. On the other hand, you were talking of people who say, what is she trying to do? And it's not going to work with me. So, initially when I came to Hyderabad and I was a principal, I was just in my late 30s, right? I had people saying, what is she trying to do? Change so many things. We're used to doing it. I have as much experience as her age, and saying it loud enough that I hear it too, So I took it with a pinch of salt, and, then looked into the kind of question papers. And I would actually tell them that, are we using Bloom's taxonomy? Are we doing only the lower rung of things where we're just recalling, remembering, or are we moving on to the understanding? Are we moving on to the analyzing? Are we actually going to those open-ended questions? Or are we actually giving kids an opportunity to actually create something out of their learning and projecting it in new scenarios? Unless you have that critical thinking, and I'm talking of 2.5 decades ago, not now. We're talking of outcome-based learning and things like that. So they would feel embarrassed because every question I would mark it, saying the level of questions are only recall. They're, only for remembering. And this, so can we tweak this question paper together? Can I help you with it?
I can visualize all of it.
Yeah.
I can see you sitting there looking at them. Red mark.
One
Okay,
thing
what is
is
the
we're
level of the
working
work?
with very sensitive egos also, and they definitely, I do not have the content knowledge like the teachers, and I will say it on record. If you give me a 12th standard, physics class or a math class, obviously I'm no good there. But when it comes to how it ought to be taught, what would make the last bencher understand, how creatively you can do things, either the project or something that will make it appealing for the child, I think I will have a clear understanding and I can guide them, right? So we've always had these discussions. So initially, when we came up with multidisciplinary projects, back then, they were like, what, I'm a physical education teacher. What am I going to integrate into the social science lesson? What am I going to integrate into this English lesson? How can we do it? Or art integration that CBSE is talking about now. We did it back then. And I would say, no, that's the fun aspect. Give the thing, let the kid just scribble, draw, and express themselves in different ways. And so art was getting integrated. And I would have subject integration by saying, this is a science subject. What would the English teacher do? What would the PED do? Or the art teacher do? Whoever. We would integrate 3, no more. But how would math, science, and English for one lesson be integrated? For some other topic, it would be Hindi and, perhaps the social science and, some game that, the PD can pitch in or whatever. So, trying to draw up these lines, and I look at it as great planning. So we look at all the lessons and I would display them, on the staff room screen and say, why don't we integrate this for 4th standard? Social science, this lesson is so interesting. And you can actually link the science lesson too with it, because we're dealing with water. We're dealing with water cycle somewhere. We're dealing with glaciers and rivers and oceans and everything else somewhere else. We're looking at a poem, about water everywhere somewhere else. I said, let's bring all of this together. And then the art teacher can say, I can teach them how to draw those rivers and, perhaps the waves in the ocean. Let's do an oil painting. And so it's a lot of fun, that happens, when you're discussing and pre-planning. I think the success of any organization, when you want to be creative and innovative, is the leader also becoming part of the academic team. Without that, it's an impossibility, to make everybody feel a part of it, and together you come up with it. And actually, you're saving so much time, Rishabh, because you're not repeating the same learning. Thematically, like, how would I put it? Now in IB, PYP and, other things, we take themes, right? We take units. Themes, and the difference in CBSE, as I explained to parents, is you have different subjects, and sometimes topics could be repeated as well. Whereas here, what we do in PYPs, we take the theme, and through the theme, we learn the subjects. That's the beauty of it all. And that becomes, so they were like, oh, no textbooks. How are we going to manage? This is how I tell them. And way back, I had to make my teachers understand that it's okay. Another thing, what I've done is that I think when it comes to curriculum, most people complain about, where's the time to do all of this? You always have that bunch of teachers. She goes on talking about all this, but then we have so many lessons, so many units. How are we going to? Nobody has enforced that we've got to complete every lesson, right? So beginning of the year, I sit with everybody and say, all of this you teach, no testing. Complete it as fast as you can, create something, and use your time effectively for integration. Use your time, wonderfully, so that you can have better field trips, come up with better engagements, where the child learns. And I think it's worked, in that sense. Freedom to do what you ought to do is every leader's. We shouldn't be grumbling about any board for that matter, or any organization. Nobody will interfere with your decisions. And as long as the child is benefiting, we have every right to fight for it and do what we ought to do. So I think sometimes I call it smart moves, simple but smart moves. And I think it works.
Oh, this is amazing. This is amazing. And the way you have put it, in fact, the number of topics you have touched and the way you have put it, I think this is a complete masterclass in itself, that what all can be done if the approach is right and if the support structure is right. And which brings me naturally to my next question. To be able to run projects like that at the time when nobody even knows about it, And we're not talking about a time when internet is on everybody's palm top.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the time when you are thinking about those things, maybe traveling a lot to understand and learn newer things, and then putting your own thought, brainstorming with your group, and then implementing, making processes and then implementing the processes, not just getting something ready-made on Google from that one school in some part of the world is implementing. So I could visualize all of that from a lens of 2 decades ago, and not just all of these things today that many people would say, okay, this is normal. So doing this at that time, and in fact doing this for a new school today even, would require one thing which is very important, which is identifying the right team members. If you don't have the right team members, the biggest of the ideas could fail. If you have the right team members, the biggest of the things could be made bigger. And that's where my curiosity lies now, to understand, what does Dr. Reddy look for when somebody comes for an interview with her? What is it that is non-negotiable for you? What is something that you feel super happy about? You see that one thing in somebody and you know that I want this person in my team. What is that ideal profile for you? Would love to know more about that.
So, when usually when we have these interviews with the teachers and, I do the final round, it is like this. For me, it is the attitude that counts first, then the skills, and lastly, the knowledge. I think when someone has the right attitude, anything can be done with that person. So all my questions would subtly be to understand whether they have that ingredient that I call to be a learner, the right attitude to, and they should love kids. It's not because we're paying them more that they're coming to our school, but I want to hear that, they love kids, so that they're going to love coming to school, and they're open enough to, they have the right attitude to imbibe the, new practices and, take it forward. The second thing is skills of delivery. Sometimes I have PhDs who, kind of applied, and I would have rejected them. It's not because they do not have all the knowledge in the world, but to come down to the child's level, to explain it very simply, you've got to be very thorough. So when I say age-appropriate skills, they are definitely the next key ingredient for me, because how you're delivering it, how creatively you're doing it, and age appropriately. Now, you cannot, have somebody with the skills, with lots of knowledge, like how they deliver in a senior secondary, to come and do that for pre-primary. Imagine, you're not able to sing, you're not able to move, you're not able to play with the kids. You need those skills. So when I say age appropriate skills, I check out what activities they've done in their previous school, and I gauge and see whether those skills are in place. And lastly, but also importantly, is the knowledge. After all, we are educators. When you do not have content knowledge, clear idea of the content, it's going to be difficult. But again, I will tell you, I have worked on these people, and they keep doing the same thing differently, and they become masters. So, I think the first two are key ingredients for me, and the language skills. I have realized over the years, because I've worked in towns, I've worked with government schools to help them out now, language is something that people struggle with. So, to say that she's got the right attitude, she's got the skills and the content, but doesn't have the communication, the children don't understand. Or the parents are not happy, saying, ma'am, we're paying so much, but look at the grammatical errors that the teacher is making. My child is going to pick that up. So, it's unfortunate that we have some lovely candidates, because of the language skills, tears my heart, and I wish we had enough time to spruce that up, but sometimes it's a difficult task. But we do work on their communication skills, whether they're maths teachers, science teachers. I could compromise a bit, and we keep correcting the accent, try to, over the years, change them, and they all do improve. It's not that they don't, but you cannot have every teacher like that, right? Absolutely. Who learns through. So that's communication is something, again, that I'm quite particular about.
Got it. Perfect. I have that in as a mind map now. What are you always looking for? And which kind of also told me that, many times, many deserving candidates would be facing challenges. And they can overcome that, one, by communication structuring, understanding technology better. Oh, technology. Understanding technology. There's a very important question on technology that just came up. So understanding technology better with now new things coming in. and then being able to have the right knowledge and present the right knowledge at the right time, right? So that said, technology also has become a very big fear in people's minds, right? Teachers' minds specifically. And you've led some of the biggest organizations. You've seen technology coming in, first slowly sneaking in, and then one day saying, now you can't do it without me, COVID. And, here's a hard update. If you don't update yourself, you can't be into education anymore. So with all of that happening, there's fear for technology, there's love for technology, there's adoption, but not the adaptation for technology. How do you see technology as an individual? What do you think is future of teaching? Do you think, things would change drastically? Would it change slowly? Your perspective on technology for teaching?
Well, I do talk of the divide that we run this program called urban-rural divide. So when I look at schools in the rural sector, it's a different ballgame altogether. When we look at schools in the cities, because of the resources that they have, it's a totally different scenario here. But years ago, when Intel started doing the training, and they had 1 lakh teachers to train, if I'm not mistaken, in a next span of time, and they approached us and, they said that we will do free training for teachers. There was a lot of resistance because nobody had even used a laptop or a computer as much. Yeah. And it was probably the computer teacher or very few people in the office. And we made it mandatory. So it was nice to say it's mandatory for all the teachers to go through it. But I think it has to begin with leadership. I'll be very frank to say that, I let my teachers, get trained. And then I realized that I have to get trained too in it, right? Otherwise, it's not going to work. So, I think all of us did whatever best we can, but my teachers were amazing, much better than us, I would say, in grasping everything, and took it forward. But that was years ago. But when you look at what happened before the pandemic, we were one of the few schools before the lockdown itself, the exams, and we had given the reports and we had a few working days. Somehow we were Googling and I came upon Zoom for the first time in my life. And I said, would it be possible to use this for teaching? And I called my computer teacher. She said, ma'am, let me go check. Even I haven't tried it out. And then I said, you go to the computer lab, open it up here. And then, let's do a session, like, a 5-minute session. And we were so amazed because I could see her and we were talking and it was, oh my God, today's Zoom is like everybody uses it. Nobody even thinks about it. For us, it was like one big excitement. And I said, chalo, now we know what exactly to do. Get all the teachers into the staff room and let's get this training on. We did not talk of using other tools, right? But just having a class, seeing your children and getting ahead with that and just sharing a couple of notes maybe, by sharing the screen. That's about it. And then there was lockdown. So I realized the impact that technology has had on all of us. And then we started doing virtual field trips. We started having breakout sessions where kids could break out and have their own discussions and then come back and share ideas back again, on them, everything done virtually. And teacher could monitor all of that. We started sending Google Forms to get survey reports. We started doing a lot of things and the excitement was on because all of us were learning, right? That was it. But when you come to rural schools, just look at it, the kind of scenario. 1, no gadgets. 2, internet is scarce. 3, electricity is not there most part of the day. Yeah. They really lost 2 years of their education. I saw that WhatsApp where in some state, a senior student had to walk n number of kilometers to reach a hilltop because the signal would only be there, sit on top of that hillock the whole day to just be able to study online. This is the pathetic divide that we have in our country. But on a positive note, I'll say, for the scale of our country and the masses being in the rural sector, technology is the only solution because good teachers can't be everywhere, but technology can. So, you have these master classes, share it with them, online, offline, doesn't matter. At least they have access to learning and at least we'll be, we'll at least be lessening the divide. That's all that I can say. So to me, technology is a very critical, crucial, and a must. It's part of our lives now, and people also talk of what's happening with technology, I'm sure with AI and chat GPT. It doesn't bother me at all. Because, I think you can't stop technological advancements, we have to learn to cope with it. So when you see an assignment, it's difficult to find out whether somebody has just taken it off, because ChatGPT, 2 students can ask the same thing and you'll get 2 different set of essays. But yes, again, technology will wake up. There will be something to even, like plagiarism. It will come out and, will help the assessors also find out whether it's an original piece or not.
Yeah.
I think instead of fighting this advancement, I go on the other end and say, let's teach our kids academic honesty, how to be ethical in their learning journey. Yeah. I would rather begin with them, because after all, this is a value we need to teach them. Right? Take pride that this is your original work. If it's not half as good as your neighbors, I'm absolutely okay with it. In fact, I'm proud of you. But if you use some, technology and just copy something from somewhere and submit it, 1, we get to know it's not original. 2, my idea of who you are will also slip, right? Yeah. I don't want that to happen, because every kid is precious. And in my eyes, I think it's important to ensure that honesty, integrity, and these values, should not be compromised for whatever reason, and least of all for marks. Because for me, education is not about that. Rishabh, I'll go back to a story of mine of how Meridian came up, is that, I had children in the top schools who were sent out of schools when they were in the 9th grade. Because in 10th, there's a board exam and the results would, then have some failures. Very easy, just give them a TC. So I had a couple of them coming to my office. Now, I was new to the city, trying to create, some value for myself in my new organization. I kept telling them, this is really unfair. Get back to your principals. Ma'am, I've been there since nursery, and now they've thrown me out. Can't you give me an admission? And I would silently tell them, go back to your principals. Then one day, this kid who would keep visiting my office told me, ma'am, this is my last conversation. So I dropped my pen and I said, hey, what is this last conversation? I'm planning to commit suicide today. And I said, oh my God. So I dropped all my work, held her hand, then contacted the parents, counseled them. I said, I'm taking this kid. Come what may, I don't care what my future is. I may be doomed and, probably even thrown out of the school, because if I can't make it. It was very critical that I prove myself after the adversity, but I realized the life of a child is far more important for me than my own career. And I said, if God's on my side and if I'm going to slog it out, everything will be fine. So I told the kids and the parents, but I'm a very firm person, soft as I may look. They ought to do everything that I'm telling them, and I will guarantee the results. I don't know with what confidence I said it. But then again, I took my team into confidence, because I can't do everything myself. I taught 2 subjects partially, but I took them into thing. I did something called minimum levels of learning to pass first. In every subject, I identified the topics, everything with the teachers. And I said, let's hit this. When we realized that they were kind of okay in a couple of months, we said, let's push it a little more. Yeah, they'll get a little better marks. And, when the results came, I think I had tears in my eyes, because we'd taken a couple of more rejects like this. We had, all distinctions and 1 first class, wow. And I think that created history. We were all out in the papers. I think some Miss World results or something were out. So everybody saw the papers, and my little article in this very famous, paper, which says Usha's philosophy, newcomer to the city. And first time I was coming in the papers. I'm not a, star. Wow. Star status was never there. I'm an educator. And I said, wow, that's a nicely written article. That interview was covered well. And after that, the calls didn't stop. In bedrooms with attached toilets. We had 685 admissions that year. Wow. And I think that was, something that changed my perspective of what can be done. If we can work it out like this with other schools who have said we can't, what can't be done? So I'm also touching upon what the other thing we did. You were talking of, the special needs children, making it an inclusive school. When everybody was shutting their doors, I said, where will these kids go? The parents literally would have tears in their eyes for no fault of theirs, right? And only thing I would tell them is that, God has chosen you because you are the best people to hold on to this kid and do what is best for them. Very easily said than done. I also realized in the same breath, what am I doing as an educator? So I said, along with you, I'm willing to risk it. Let's take these kids. I'm not promising you anything, but I will assure you they will have good social skills. Emotionally, they'll be happy kids. If I can, they'll do well in the exams. If they can't, so be it. Because we have limitations when we take mildly autistic kids and, other children with differently abled. And, I think if you ask me what has made you most happy, I would say it's these kids, who are achieving so well. One that, who went on to run his own dad's company. And, another one who is visually impaired, doing his PhD currently in, in Seattle, Washington University. And I think these are stories that I think no award will give you the satisfaction. I can tell you that if you've touched a child's life, I think your job is done. It is not the awards, that you have, behind you, they're there. It's okay. But I think, when you touch others' lives and actually make a difference, give them the hope that they can, carry on with life and carry on well. In fact, proving to the world that they're no less than the others. I think that's a very strong statement, and I'm very, very proud of my team wherever I've worked. And I think it's given me immense happiness. Whatever little contribution we've done it from our hearts. That's for sure.
So beautiful. This is so, I'm so touched right now. I have these goosebumps while you were sharing all of those things. And, it moved right from technology to being a new principal to creating that difference to accepting people who nobody wanted to taking it to an extreme of saying, I'm not going to be leaving any kid behind and I'm going to be impacting everyone that comes. It's so mind blowing, One of the key things that we work on as an organization is inspiring next generations to get into teaching. That's one of the core things that we want to do. And, the biggest challenge is making people realize how beautiful the teaching profession is and how it is not an impact for a day or two that you create an impact for a lifetime. And right now, here in this podcast, now I seek your help. I'm seeking your help in making a pitch. Let's call it a sales pitch. Let's call it a marketing pitch. Let's call it a pitch, but whatever. But I would request you to make a pitch now to the future generations, people in the universities, people in the schools, and telling them about the teaching profession. The holistic picture. Money, social impact, what can they gain? If they take the right risks, what all can they achieve? Even financially, teaching is no more a low income job. It's an average and above average income job if you're in the right place. So right. I think you are the best person right now to talk about teaching as a profession and making a pitch to these future generations about why should they consider teaching as their ultimate profession. So over to you, ma'am. Would love to hear this pitch. I'm waiting for it now.
This is called pinning me online, for, so that I now just have to respond to you. But it's a pleasure because this is something that I've always talked about when we have our career guidance fairs and awareness programs, saying we talk of all the, opportunities that are available for our children and we expose them to everything. And I would say the biggest stall should be for people taking up the teaching profession, and I believe in it. And with the NEP, I'm so glad that it's getting integrated into the undergrad process itself. So you do a 4-year and you come out with a bachelor's and in education as well. See, the reason is, when I talk to kids, and I say, what do you want to become? They will say, I'll become an engineer. I want to become, get into hospitality. So I want to be a chef. I want to become a journalist. It could be everything. And then I stop and say, but do you know, y'all are not talking of one profession that creates all these professions. How come y'all have not talked about a teacher? And that's how, you get them to understand. And it's nice when you expose them to this idea. People get on to other walks of life and, get on to other professions. I know many of them who've quit those professions and come back to teaching. Because ultimately you have to also let a child know, why is it that you're taking that profession? If it's money, there's money here too. Fortunately today it's not so bad. But, let's say you make a little more money outside as well, that's not enough. Because by the end of the day, I can tell you that, when you look at your life, you ought to feel that you actually made an impact somewhere. I'm not saying it's not possible with other professions, but with teaching, it's a lifelong influence that you've made. That's why they say, you can never say where the impact of a teacher stops, because it is for eternity, perpetuality, it's forever, I would say. So we all think of our teachers and, those little things that actually make you wonder as a child about a lot of things. So I think talking is important. And I think this is a line when, the students come back to you, no matter where you go. You could be a vice president of an IT company. You go for a movie, I go for a movie. I can vouch for it. I will have at least 5 to 10 people who will recognize us as teachers, even if we don't recognize them, and say, ma'am, how are you doing? And, remember I was there in this class and that incident, and remember how you did this to me. Today I'm doing this. Thanks to, my teacher having corrected me then. What can give you more joy than that? So I think there's certain things that you cannot match. I mean, like I say, the end of it all, is it the money that you've earned that's going to keep you happy in your old age? Is it going to be your health? For sure, because that's something you ought to concentrate on. And now that I'm with the EMRI Green Health services of this group, I'm also getting into health. It's important. If you don't have good health and you have all the money, what did Steve Jobs say? Not even worth it. He also talked of, when he was connecting the dots of his life, talked about relationships and how he wished that he had some more time to spend with family. This is a beautiful profession, and the only profession, I think, where you're with kids, you have time for your children, you have time for your family, you also get back home at the right time, take care of your own family, you have a lot of holidays, and you have a lot of admiration from your students for doing the right things. So I think teaching today is is a wonderful profession. And I think with the ramping up of the curriculum, where technology becomes part of the B.Ed process as well. And, we also talk of, the special needs, becoming a part of that curriculum. And I hope they, kind of merge that as well as into a chapter or two. I think it should give educators a holistic training about how, when they're actually in school, they can function better. So these are few things. We keep putting these thoughts across as a member of FICCI, representing Andhra and Telangana school departments. I was also talking about this. And I hope that, they send up the details so that, somewhere the voice should be heard. Make it such an impactful, exciting thing for them. And believe me, in the end, you're only going to feel satisfied because you've made a social impact. And contributing in this line is something, it's not easy. You can never say that a teacher's day, ends when she leaves the school. She's there 24/7 for her kids, right? And she's there anytime. I have children who've left me decades ago, who'll one day call me in the middle of the night, and I'm like waking up to this, and they say, ma'am, I know that, the timings are not okay, but I'm in US and, I achieved this, and, just wanted to share with you. There've also been calls, of guys who've done so well, waking me up in the night and saying, ma'am, you're the only one I can share this, but I think I'm going through a lot of stress. I don't think I can hold on to this anymore. I want to give up on my life. So, when you're not achiever, topping the schools, doing so well in your company, but what happened to your emotional skills and social skills there if you become a loner? So, it's so wonderful when these kids, even in that state, think of you and call you for help. That means you've made some little impact in their lives. And then you counsel them, and you also, talk to the parents, and the parents also get into this, and they break down, sometimes, ma'am, our kids didn't tell us this. How come they're talking to you about it? So, sometimes I think, it's a different role we play, but I think, it's a very satisfying one, and more the merrier. And I would say today's youngsters are fantastic. And if they get into this line and, make the social impact, I'd like to close with this by, the answer to this question by saying, let's not say that our youth are useless. I think they're being used less. So the fault is with us. We have to give them the direction to do the right things. So I think if we need more teachers, who best than us to start talking about it and tell them it's a great career and one that will fill not just your pockets, but your hearts as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I usually summarize things. I'm not going to do that today. I'm not going to say anything after this. I'm going to leave the podcast, end the podcast on this high right now. And I just want to thank you. I just want to thank you for your time. Every single listener is going to be so impacted by this episode. I'm just wowed right now, Dr. Reddy. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
I think I'll just add one thing, Rishabh. With this, with our chairman, Dr. GVK Reddy, and his vision, to save lives, through this PPP model that they have of 108 services that are across the country. I was telling him that I'm not from the medical background, till the schools start off, what am I going to do? And he said, till then, you can just look into what's happening at the EMRI, Green Health Services campus. And this idea came to me, and I want to share it with you, that NEP talks of 10 bagless days, right? We also talk of life skills that are an integral part of schooling system. So I was wondering, if we have, because the EMRI, this campus, they've done such wonderful work, the entire team. They have a tie-up with Stanford. They have a tie-up with Wisconsin. They have a tie-up with the American Heart Association, so on and so forth. But what happens, if there's an emergency and we don't do the right things within the first couple of minutes, can be disaster and a loss of life. So it could happen at home, it could happen at school. So if we have a participation certificate with the, on first respondent care, for school children, and also a slightly higher one for the senior college students, I think it would be a wonderful thing for them, because, I think this is something that needs to get scaled up, all over the world, if we are all aware, because what is more precious to us than life? And, educated as we are, but ignorant about what to do in an eventuality.
Yeah.
And when a life is gone, we'll only live with guilt. So I think my new mission is going to be now to also see how this training can be imparted to teachers and a train the trainer concept, and then see how it can be leveraged in a lot more organizations. Some universities, like the University of Hyderabad, Central University of Hyderabad, has an MOU with us where they have credits for it. So the college students are going through it. I just wish and hope more teachers, more school children, college children and universities take this on to live with the mission of what our chairman has to, first be aware before we can help and then save lives. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Beautiful mission. And we will discuss about how we can do something about this for the teachers at large. There are hundreds of thousands of teachers attached with the Surasa Learning Universe today, and would love to understand how we could, share this with more and more teachers. This podcast, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure everybody is feeling super inspired. And I thank all the listeners for enjoying the podcast today. I'll be coming very soon again with another inspirational educator to inspire you in becoming a better educator. Till then, bye-bye.